Hello and welcome to this episode of the Academic Papers Podcast, where we celebrate academia and bring education to everyone.
Absolutely.
Today we're diving into a topic that's making waves.
You okay?
The possibility of microplastics in the human brain.
Right.
A new case study published in JAMA Network Open suggests that these tiny particles might be reaching further into our bodies than we ever imagined.
It is a rather unsettling thought.
Yeah.
For a long time, we believed the blood-brain barrier acted like an impenetrable shield,
Right.
protecting the brain from harmful substances. But this study proposes a different entry point. The olfactory bulb, the area responsible for our sense of smell.
So we're talking about microplastics potentially bypassing this crucial defense system.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through how that might work?
Think about what happens when you smell something.
Okay.
Tiny odor molecules travel up your nose and bind to olfactory neurons.
Right.
These neurons send signals directly to the olfactory bulb,
Okay.
which processes those signals and allows you to perceive the smell. The key here is that the olfactory bulb has direct connections to the brain's limbic system, the area responsible for emotions, memory, and even learning.
Okay, so if microplastics can hitch a ride on this olfactory expressway, they're essentially getting VIP access to some pretty critical parts of the brain.
Right.
That's a little unnerving.
Yeah.
But is there any solid evidence to suggest this is actually happening?
That's where this study comes in.
Okay.
Researchers analyzed brain tissue, specifically the olfactory bulb from 15 deceased individuals.
Okay.
What they found is pretty startling.
Yeah.
8 of those individuals had detectable microplastics in their olfactory bulbs.
Yeah, that's over half the individuals studied. Makes you wonder how widespread this might be.
Right.
What kinds of microplastics were they finding? Are we talking about obscure materials or things we encounter every day?
The most common type detected was polypropylene. You probably interact with it daily.
Okay.
It's in food packaging, clothing ropes, carpets, all sorts of everyday items. That means our potential exposure to microplastics that could reach the brain is potentially quite high.
That's a sobering thought.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
And now, knowing that it might be making its way into our brains is a whole other level of concern.
Right.
This isn't just about environmental pollution anymore. It's about our health,
Yeah.
potentially even our cognitive function.
And that's exactly what makes this study so significant.
Yeah.
It raises crucial questions about the potential long-term health implications of this exposure.
Right.
What does it mean for brain health? Could it be contributing to neurological problems?
Yeah.
These are questions we urgently need answers to.
Absolutely. This isn't just an environmental issue anymore.
Right.
It's a human health issue.
Absolutely.
And before we dive into those potential implications, can you tell us a bit more about what the researchers found?
The sizes of the microplastics they found were quite small.
Okay.
The particles ranged from 5.5 to 26.4 micrometers, and the fibers were even longer, averaging 21.4 micrometers.
Can you put those sizes into perspective for us? How small are we really talking?
To give you an idea, the width of a human hair is about 50 to 100 micrometers.
Okay.
So these microplastics are incredibly tiny, much smaller than the width of a hair.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling to think these particles could be making their way into our bodies and potentially our brains.
It makes you wonder if there are even smaller particles, nanoplastics,
Right.
that we're not even able to detect yet with current technology. If these microplastics are getting through, what's stopping even smaller particles?
That is a valid concern, and it highlights one of the study's limitations. We're still in the early stages of understanding the full extent of microplastic and nanoplastic pollution and their potential impact on human health.
So we're essentially dealing with an invisible threat. What does this mean for us? Where do we go from here?
This research is a call to action. It emphasizes the need for further investigation, particularly using non-invasive imaging techniques like MRI, to better understand the extent of microplastic accumulation in human organs and their impact on our health.
We need to know more and quickly.
Indeed, this is a wake-up call. We need to understand what these tiny particles are doing in our brains, what the potential risks are, and ultimately what steps we can take to mitigate this potential threat. This study also raises questions about other potential pathways, for microplastics to enter the body and potentially reach the brain.
Oh, okay.
While the olfactory system seems to be a key route, it might not be the only one.
That's a chilling thought.
Yeah.
So even if we could somehow avoid inhaling these particles, there might be other ways they're getting in. How else could they be entering our systems?
Some studies suggest that microplastics could be transported through the bloodstream after being ingested. They could potentially even make their way into the brain via the respiratory pathway through a nerve called the trigeminal nerve.
It seems like we're surrounded. It's in the air. We breathe the water. We drink the food we eat. And now we're finding evidence that it's potentially accumulating in one of our most vital organs. What does this mean for our long-term health? What are the potential consequences of having these particles in our brains?
While this specific study didn't delve into the health effects, other research offers some clues. Studies have shown that microplastics can trigger inflammation and oxidative stress in cells. They've also been linked to disruptions in the balance of neurotransmitters, the chemical messengers that allow brain cells to communicate.
So even though this research is still emerging, there's a growing body of evidence suggesting that these particles could be doing real damage at a cellular level. And when we're talking about the brain, that's particularly worrisome.
Absolutely. The brain is an incredibly complex and delicate organ. Any disruption to its finely tuned systems can have significant consequences. There's growing concern that microplastic exposure could be a factor in the development of neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, but more research is needed to establish a definitive link.
It's a scary thought, but it's also a call to action. We need to be investing in research to understand these risks better and to develop strategies to protect ourselves. But what can we do right now? Is there anything we can do to mitigate our exposure to these particles?
While we can't completely eliminate our exposure, there are certainly steps we can take to reduce it. One of the most impactful things we can do is to reduce our reliance on single-use plastics, bringing our own reusable bags to the grocery store, using refillable water bottles, and choosing reusable containers for leftovers. These are simple but effective changes.
Those are great everyday steps we can all take. What about the microplastics that are already in the environment? Is there any way to remove them or prevent them from spreading further?
That's a challenge, but researchers are exploring innovative solutions. There's promising research on using bioremediation techniques, essentially harnessing the power of microorganisms to break down plastics.
So we might be able to enlist nature's help in cleaning up our mess.
Exactly, and there's also a lot of work being done on developing advanced filtration systems that can remove microplastics from water. Some cities are even experimenting with adding these filters to their wastewater treatment plants.
It's encouraging to hear that there are people working on solutions both on an individual level and on a larger scale.
Yeah.
But this feels like a problem that requires a global effort.
Yeah.
What role do governments and industries play in addressing this issue?
They play a critical role. We need stronger regulations on plastic production, use, and disposal. We need investments in recycling infrastructure and a shift towards a more circular economy where plastics are reused and recycled rather than ending up in landfills or polluting our environment.
So it's not just about individual choices, it's about holding corporations and governments accountable for the way plastics are produced and managed.
Precisely. It's a multifaceted problem that requires a multifaceted approach. We need individual action, corporate responsibility, and government intervention to tackle this challenge effectively.
Let's shift gears for a moment and talk about this study's findings in a bit more detail. You mentioned earlier that polypropylene was the most common type of microplastic found in the olfactory bulb. Why is that significant?
It's significant because polypropylene is one of the most widely used plastics in the world. It's in everything from packaging and textiles to car parts and medical devices. This finding suggests that our exposure to polypropylene microplastics is potentially quite high, and it reinforces the need to reconsider our reliance on this material.
It's a sobering reminder that the plastics we use every day could be having unintended consequences, potentially even affecting our brains.
And it's not just polypropylene. The researchers also found other types of plastics in the olfactory bulb, including polyamide nylon and polyethylene vinyl acetate.
So it's not just one type of plastic we need to be worried about. It's a whole range of materials that are ubiquitous in our modern world.
Exactly. This underscores the need for a systemic approach to addressing plastic pollution. We need to rethink the way we produce, use, and dispose of plastics to reduce their impact on the environment and human health. This research has really opened a Pandora's box of questions. We're only beginning to understand the potential health consequences of microplastic exposure.
It's a whole new frontier of scientific inquiry. What's particularly unsettling is that we're talking about the brain here, the control center of our bodies. Our thoughts, our emotions, if microplastics are affecting the brain, what does that mean for our cognitive health, our mental well-being, even our personalities?
Those are all valid concerns, and it's not just about the physical presence of these tiny particles. We also need to consider the chemicals they carry. Many plastics contain additives like phthalates and bisphenols, which are known endocrine disruptors.
Endocrine disruptors, those are chemicals that can interfere with our hormones, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about potential impacts on everything from growth and development to metabolism and reproduction.
Exactly, and there's growing concern that these endocrine disruptors could have neurodevelopmental effects, particularly in children. We're just beginning to understand the complex interplay between these chemicals, our brains, and our overall health.
It's almost like a domino effect.
Mhm.
Microplastics carrying potentially harmful chemicals, those chemicals disrupting our hormones, and those hormonal disruptions potentially affecting our brain development and function. It's a sobering thought, and it makes you realize that this problem is much bigger than just those tiny particles themselves.
It's a reminder that everything is interconnected. Our health, the environment, the choices we make, what we put into the environment ultimately affects us as well.
This study serves as a powerful call to action. We need to prioritize research to understand these risks better, to develop strategies to protect ourselves, and to find ways to clean up the mess we've already created. But where do we even begin? It feels like such an overwhelming problem.
It's true, the scale of plastic pollution can feel daunting, but we can't let that paralyze us. We need to act on multiple fronts: individual actions, corporate responsibility, and government intervention. We need a holistic approach to tackle this challenge effectively.
Individuals can start by reducing their reliance on single-use plastics, choosing reusable alternatives whenever possible, and being mindful of the products they buy. But it can't stop there. We need companies to step up and take responsibility for the entire life cycle of their products, from production to disposal, and we need governments to implement stricter regulations and invest in solutions that address the root causes of plastic pollution.
You're absolutely right. It's going to take a collective effort to turn the tide on this issue. Scientists, policymakers, industry leaders, and individuals, we all have a role to play in creating a more sustainable future.
This research has really highlighted the urgency of the situation.
Yeah.
We can't afford to wait any longer to address this problem.
Yeah.
The health of our planet and potentially our own brains is at stake.
The study is a wake-up call, a reminder that our actions have consequences. We need to be more mindful of our impact on the environment, and we need to demand better from those in power. The future of our planet and our own health depends on it.
To view more on this paper, go to academicjobs.com and search for Luis Fernando Amato Lorenzo Katia, Cristina Dantas, Gabriel Ribeiro Jr., Guido Ribeiro Paez, Romulo Augusto, and Raúl de Oliveira Freitas, Johanna Maria Menezes, M. Costa Renata Esurabelo Kelly, Cristina Suarez Bispo, Regiani Carvalho Oliveira, and Taisma Awad. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the world of microplastics and the human brain. It's been a thought-provoking conversation, and we hope it sparks some important questions for you as well. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.